A drunk man thought he could ride a royal guard's horse, mocking centuries of tradition. But one calculated move from the horse and its rider left him screaming in humiliation. Here's what happened. Before we continue, let us know in the comments below where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow at the same time, we'll bring you another incredible story showcasing the bravery and discipline of the Royal Guard. You won't want to miss it. The morning sun cast long shadows across Horse Guard's parade as Guard James Crawford stood at his post, his mount's coat gleaming like burnished copper in the early light. The magnificent bay stallion, Sovereign, stood as still as his rider, both of them living statues representing centuries of military tradition. Guard Crawford's 8 years of active service, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, had earned him this prestigious position, yet this wasn't just ceremonial duty. The Horse Guards remained active-duty cavalry soldiers, their skills honed for modern warfare, even as they maintained centuries-old traditions. Every crease in Crawford's uniform, every gleaming button and polished strap spoke of the meticulous discipline that had become second nature during his military career. The usual morning crowd of tourists and locals had begun to gather, maintaining a respectful distance as they admired the timeless spectacle. Crawford's eyes, though fixed forward in ceremonial attention, remained sharp, scanning the crowd with the practiced vigilance of a combat veteran. 8 years of military service had taught him to read people, to sense trouble before it fully materialized. That's when he noticed him, a man in his 30s, weaving unsteadily through the gathering crowd. Even at this distance, the signs were clear. The rumpled designer clothes, the aggressive swagger, the telltale sway of someone who'd started drinking long before noon. Derek Miller, though Crawford didn't know his name yet, was projecting the particular confidence of the deeply insecure, fueled by expensive whiskey and an oversized ego. "Bloody waste of taxpayer money," Miller's voice carried across the parade ground, words slurring at the edges. He shouldered his way through a group of Japanese tourists, sending their carefully arranged photos into disarray. Sitting up there like they're something special. Crawford remained motionless, but his muscles tensed imperceptibly beneath his immaculate uniform. Years of military service had taught him to recognize brewing trouble, and something in Miller's bearing, the way his hands clenched and unclenched, the deliberate provocation in his voice, set off warning bells. Sovereign, sensing his rider's subtle shift in awareness, flicked an ear back, but maintained his disciplined stance. The morning was young, the sun barely cleared of the historic buildings surrounding the parade ground, but already the air crackled with tension. As Miller drew closer, his expensive loafers scuffing against the ancient cobblestones, Crawford could tell this would be a morning that tested more than just ceremonial discipline. "Hey, tin soldier!" Miller's voice grew louder as he staggered closer, expensive Scotch fumes preceding him like a toxic cloud. "Do you know how much it costs to maintain these horses, these costumes?" He gestured expansively, nearly losing his balance. "My taxes pay for this circus." Several onlookers backed away, creating a small bubble of space around the increasingly belligerent man. A mother hurriedly guided her children behind a stone pillar, while an elderly gentleman wearing a Royal Cavalry veteran's pin watched the scene unfold with growing concern. Sovereign stood perfectly still, but his ears twitched slightly, the only visible sign of his heightened awareness. Like his rider, the horse was no mere ceremonial prop. He was a carefully selected and meticulously trained military mount, a veteran of countless parades and ceremonies, but also capable of performing in the most demanding tactical situations. Each Horse Guard mount underwent years of specialized training, learning to remain calm under gunfire, navigate through crowds, and respond instantly to the subtlest command. Miller circled closer, his designer watch catching the morning sun as he gestured mockingly. "Look at this! They've got him up there like some statue in a theme park." He turned to address the uncomfortable crowd. "You all think this is real? This is just dress-up, play acting for the tourists." Crawford's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Through his peripheral vision, he could see two fellow horse guards at their posts, their own mounts, standing rock steady. The bond between horse and rider was something civilians like Miller couldn't understand, forged through countless hours of training, built on absolute trust and mutual respect. "Bet that horse isn't even real cavalry stock," Miller sneered, his voice carrying the particular cruelty of those who mock what they don't understand. "Probably some rental from a petting zoo, dressed up to look impressive." He stumbled closer, invading the sacred space around the mounted guard. "Just like this whole setup. All show, no substance." The elderly veteran shifted his position, years of military bearing evident in his posture. He recognized what Miller, in his alcohol-fueled arrogance, couldn't see. That beneath the ceremonial uniform was a highly trained cavalry soldier, and under the ornate tack was a horse capable of switching from parade ground discipline to battlefield readiness in an instant. "You know what I think?" Miller announced, fumbling with his tie as he addressed the growing crowd. "I think this whole thing's a joke, a tourist trap." His voice grew louder, more challenging. "These aren't real soldiers, they're actors, and that's not a war horse, it's a prop." Crawford remained motionless, but his mind was active. 8 years of military service had taught him to read situations, to anticipate trouble before it erupted. Something in Miller's bearing, the way he kept edging closer, the growing aggression in his voice, suggested this was building toward more than just drunken taunts. Sovereign's nostrils flared slightly, picking up on the mounting tension. The horse's muscles rippled beneath his gleaming coat, ready to respond to the slightest command from his rider. Like Crawford, he had been trained for moments like this, when ceremony might need to give way to action at a moment's notice. The morning sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the parade ground, as Miller took another unsteady step forward. The space between him and the mounted guard had shrunk to mere feet, and the air seemed to crackle with potential energy. In the distance, palace security had noticed the commotion, but they were still too far to intervene in whatever was about to unfold. "You think you're so special up there?" Miller swayed closer, his hand reaching out towards Sovereign's flank. "I rode horses at my daddy's country estate. Better horses than this." He stumbled, catching himself against a barrier post. "This glorified carousel pony." Two young children clutched their father's hands, wide-eyed as the scene unfolded. The elderly veteran had moved closer, his weathered face set in grim anticipation. After 30 years of military service, he recognized the signs of imminent confrontation. "I bet," Miller's voice took on a dangerous edge, "I could ride that horse better than you." His tie had come loose, hanging askew over his rumpled designer shirt. "What do you say, soldier boy? Let a real horseman show you how it's done." Sovereign's ears pinned back slightly, a warning sign that anyone familiar with horses would have heeded immediately. But Miller, emboldened by expensive scotch and wounded pride, was beyond recognizing danger signals. "Look at him, just sitting there," Miller addressed the crowd, playing to his unwilling audience. "Thinks he's better than us because he's up on that horse. Well, guess what?" He took another step forward, breaching the invisible line of propriety. "It's just a horse, and I'm going to prove it." The veteran's hand moved unconsciously to the cavalry pin on his lapel. He knew what Miller couldn't comprehend, that these weren't merely ceremonial mounts. Each horse guard's horse was a carefully selected military animal, capable of switching from parade ground serenity to battlefield readiness in an instant. "You watch this," Miller announced, his voice carrying the particular bravado of those about to do something monumentally foolish. "I'm going to show everyone here what a joke this whole thing is." He shrugged off his expensive jacket, letting it fall to the ground as he approached Sovereign's left side. Crawford remained motionless, but his muscles coiled with trained readiness beneath his uniform. Years of military service had taught him to anticipate threats from any quarter, even from drunken civilians who didn't understand the danger they were courting. "Just a horse," Miller repeated, more to himself now as he drew alongside Sovereign's powerful shoulder. Just a bloody horse playing dress-up, like everything else in this tourist trap. Miller reached for Sovereign's saddle, his manicured hand moving toward the ceremonial tack with the misplaced confidence of someone who truly believed money and privilege made him untouchable. "Time to get off your high horse, soldier," Miller slurred, grasping Sovereign's ornate saddle with unsteady hands. "Let someone who actually owns horses show you how it's done." His expensive loafers scraped against the cobblestones as he attempted to hoist himself up, the sound echoing off the historic walls like fingernails on slate. Sovereign, sensing the unauthorized intrusion, shifted his weight ever so slightly, a warning that Miller was too drunk to comprehend. The horse's muscles tensed beneath his gleaming coat, years of training allowing him to remain mostly still while preparing for his rider's command. Every fibre of the magnificent animal seemed to vibrate with controlled energy, like a coiled spring waiting for release. The crowd had drawn back further, creating a wider circle around the unfolding scene. A group of school children on a field trip watched wide-eyed as their teacher attempted to use the moment as an impromptu lesson about respect, her whispered words carrying on the morning breeze. Several military veterans in the crowd had moved closer together, their bearing suggesting they were prepared to intervene if necessary. "Sir," Crawford's voice cut through the tension like a sword, breaking his ceremonial silence for the first time. "Step away from the horse immediately." Each word carried the weight of military authority, the tone one that had commanded men in battle. His voice held the same steady control that had directed troops through firefights in Helmand Province, where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. But Miller, too far gone in his alcohol-fueled bravado, merely laughed. "Oh, so you can talk. Guess the robot has a voice after all." He maintained his grip on the saddle, swaying dangerously, the expensive scotch on his breath, likely worth several £100 a bottle, mixed with the morning air. "Don't worry, mate. I won't hurt your precious pony. Just going to show everyone here what a real horseman looks like." The veteran stepped forward, his cavalry experience evident in every movement. His campaign medals clinked softly against his jacket as he moved. "Son, you're making a serious mistake. That's not just any horse." "Oh, shut it, old man," Miller snapped, attempting to put his foot in the stirrup. His designer trousers stretched awkwardly across his leg as he struggled for balance. "I've got horses worth more than this entire setup in my private stables." His next words came between panting breaths as he struggled to coordinate his movements, his face reddening with exertion. "This is just a trained monkey in fancy dress, and I'm going to prove it." A palace guard in the distance had started running toward them, his radio crackling with urgent communications, but he was still too far to prevent what was about to unfold. The morning air seemed to thicken with tension, even the pigeons on nearby rooftops falling silent, as if sensing the impending confrontation. Crawford's voice took on an edge of steel, the kind forged in combat situations where words had to carry absolute authority. "This is your final warning, sir. Release the saddle and step back, or I will be forced to take action." His words carried the weight of every military command he'd ever given, from training exercises to actual combat scenarios. "Take action!" Miller laughed, the sound harsh and bitter, echoing off the ancient stones. "What are you going to do? Break your precious ceremony? Risk your tourist attraction job?" His fingers tightened on the leather straps, his manicured nails leaving marks on the carefully maintained tack. "No, I don't think you will, because this is all just a show, isn't it? A pretty parade for the cameras." The crowd held its collective breath. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking in a stage whisper why the bad man was being so mean to the horse. Several tourists had lowered their cameras, the moment too real and tense for mere photographs. With that, Miller made his move. Using the stirrup for leverage, he attempted to haul himself up onto Sovereign's back, his movements clumsy and aggressive. His other hand grabbed at the horse's mane for support, yanking hard enough to make any trained horseman wince. His foot slipped against the stirrup, making a harsh, scraping sound against the polished metal. What happened next was a testament to years of military training, both horse and rider moving as one with devastating precision. The kind of coordination that could only come from countless hours of drilling, from facing real-world situations where perfect unity between mount and rider meant survival. Sovereign, responding to an imperceptible command from Crawford, a slight shift in weight, a subtle pressure of the knee, executed a perfect defensive maneuver. The horse's powerful shoulders twisted, his hooves moving in a precise pattern that seemed to defy his size. Each step was carefully measured, the result of training that had prepared him for everything from ceremonial duties to crowd control situations. In an instant, Miller found himself desperately off balance, his grip on the saddle suddenly worthless as the horse pivoted beneath him. Crawford's hand shot out, catching Miller's collar with practiced efficiency. The guard's grip was neither cruel nor painful, just precisely controlled enough to prevent the drunk man from falling under Sovereign's hooves. The movement was smooth, professional, and spoke of years of combat training. It was the same grip he'd used to pull wounded comrades to safety under fire, now employed to protect even those who showed no respect for his position. "I warned you, sir." Crawford's voice remained measured, even as he held Miller suspended in an awkward position, halfway between mounting and falling. The morning sun caught his brass buttons, each one reflecting the perfect control he maintained over the situation. "These horses are not toys. They are trained military mounts, and I am not a tourist attraction." His grip tightened slightly, emphasizing each word. "I am an active-duty cavalry officer with 8 years of service, including 2 combat tours. Now, shall we discuss the appropriate way to behave around Her Majesty's Horse Guards?" Miller hung there, his designer clothes dishevelled, the last of his arrogance draining away as reality finally began to pierce his alcohol-fogged brain. His imported silk tie had come completely undone, hanging like a surrender flag from his collar. "Let me explain something to you," Crawford continued, his grip maintaining perfect control as Miller squirmed uncomfortably. "This costume you mocked, it's worn by active-duty cavalry officers who've earned it through years of service. That carousel pony you tried to mount. He's a veteran of military ceremonies and tactical training exercises that would make your private stables look like a petting zoo." With deliberate precision, Crawford guided Miller back to his feet, though his white-gloved hand remained firmly on the man's collar. Miller's expensive shirt was now soaked with nervous sweat, his earlier bravado replaced by the dawning realization that he'd severely miscalculated. "These horses," Crawford's voice carried across the now silent parade ground, "are specifically chosen and trained for years before they earn the right to serve in the Horse Guards. Sovereign here has more discipline in one hoof than you've displayed in your entire performance today." As if on cue, Sovereign shifted his weight slightly, his movement so controlled that Crawford didn't need to adjust his position at all. The horse's eyes, bright with intelligence, remained fixed forward, but his ears swiveled back, alert to every sound, every movement, just as he'd been trained. I didn't..." Miller's voice had lost its mocking edge, replaced by the uncertainty of someone suddenly forced to face consequences. His designer clothes, which had seemed so impressive earlier, now hung on him like expensive wrapping paper on a deflated package. "No, you didn't," Crawford cut him off, his tone carrying the weight of every soldier who'd ever stood guard over tradition. "You didn't think. You didn't consider that these ceremonies represent centuries of military history. You didn't respect that this horse and this uniform serve a purpose beyond your entertainment." The elderly veteran moved closer, his cavalry pin catching the morning light. "That horse could have seriously injured you, son," The fact that he didn't is a testament to his training and the guard's control. In my day, we saw horses like these in actual combat situations. They're not just for show. Miller's legs trembled slightly as Crawford's words sank in. The alcohol that had fueled his courage was rapidly giving way to the cold sobriety of humiliation. I have horses, he muttered weakly, as if that somehow excused his behaviour. No, Crawford's voice took on an edge of steel. You have pets. This is a military mount, trained to respond to over 40 different command signals, capable of maintaining position under gunfire, and disciplined enough to show more restraint than you have. His grip remained steady. The only reason you're not lying in the infirmary right now is because both Sovereign and I are better trained than you gave us credit for. A palace guard had finally reached them, his presence adding official weight to the situation. Sir, he addressed Miller, I'll need you to come with me. Attempting to mount a horse guard's horse is a serious offence. Miller's face had gone from red with drunken confidence to pale with realization. I wasn't really going to. You were going to make a mockery of everything this uniform represents, Crawford stated flatly. Instead, you've only succeeded in demonstrating why we maintain such rigorous standards of discipline. He released Miller's collar with precise control, letting the palace guard take charge of the situation. As Miller was led away, his expensive loafers scuffing against the cobblestones, Crawford's voice carried one final message. Remember this moment, sir. Remember that beneath the ceremony and tradition, we are soldiers first. These horses are military animals first. And this isn't a show. It's a duty we've earned the right to perform. The crowd remained silent, absorbing the lesson they'd just witnessed. Parents drew their children closer, using the moment to whisper explanations about respect and tradition. The veteran nodded slowly, his own service history adding weight to Crawford's words. Miller's earlier words about carousel ponies and tourist attractions hung in the air like smoke, dispersed by the undeniable reality of military precision and disciplined strength they'd just witnessed. His attempt to prove the horse guards were just for show had instead proven exactly why they deserved the respect he'd failed to give. 8 generations, Crawford's voice carried across the parade ground as Miller was detained nearby. His words meant not just for the troublemaker, but for all who witnessed the incident. That's how long the horse guards have served as a fully operational cavalry unit. Not as tourist attractions, not as ceremonial figures, but as soldiers. The veteran stepped forward, his bearing matching Crawford's military precision. I served with the Blues and Royals in the First Gulf War, he addressed the gathered crowd. These horses you see here, they're chosen from the finest military stock, trained to the same exacting standards we used in active service. Each one is worth more than any prize stallion in private stables, not in money, but in capability and training. Sovereign stood motionless, but his presence seemed to have grown larger, more commanding. His gleaming coat and precise stance spoke of countless hours of training, of a partnership between horse and rider that went far beyond mere ceremony. You see these straps? Crawford gestured to Sovereign's tack with his free hand. Each one has a purpose, a history, a meaning. This isn't pageantry. It's a living testament to cavalry traditions that remain relevant in modern warfare. These horses are trained for crowd control, urban patrol, and tactical maneuvers that your private mounts couldn't begin to comprehend. Miller, now standing between 2 palace guards, had lost all traces of his earlier arrogance. His expensive clothes, wrinkled and stained, seemed to hang on him differently now, like costumes rather than symbols of status. The horse guards, Crawford continued, his voice carrying the weight of every soldier who'd ever worn the uniform, aren't here for your entertainment. We maintain these traditions because they represent something vital to military service, the discipline, precision, and unwavering dedication that keeps soldiers alive in combat. The veteran nodded, touching his cavalry pin. I've seen these horses and their riders in action during actual operations. The same discipline that allows them to stand perfectly still for hours enables them to respond instantly in tactical situations. That's not something you learn in private stables or country clubs. Every morning, Crawford's words cut through the air like a sabre. We put on this uniform knowing it represents centuries of sacrifice and service. Every time we mount these horses, we carry forward a legacy of military excellence that demands absolute respect, not because of how it looks, but because of what it means and what it requires. The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the power of the moment. Parents lifted children onto shoulders, pointing out details of the horse and uniform, whispered explanations now carrying new weight and understanding. So the next time you're tempted to dismiss this as mere ceremony, Crawford concluded, his eyes sweeping the gathering, remember what you witnessed today. Remember that beneath the tradition lies real military capability. Beneath the ceremony lies combat readiness. And beneath the pageantry lies the heart of a cavalry unit that served with distinction for generations. With palace security preparing to escort Miller away, he surprised everyone by suddenly speaking up, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. I want to apologize, he said, looking directly at Guard Crawford. My behavior was inexcusable. I let alcohol and my own ignorance cloud my judgment. Crawford acknowledged the apology with a slight nod, maintaining his professional bearing. The Horse Guards have faced far worse than drunk civilians, sir. What matters is understanding why we stand here, why we maintain these standards. The veteran approached Miller, his voice carrying the wisdom of experience. Son, I was stationed in bases across the world during my service. Every nation's military has its ceremonial units, but few combine active duty and tradition like the Horse Guards. That's what you failed to grasp. These aren't performers in a show. They're soldiers maintaining a vital link between military past and present. Miller nodded slowly, his expensive watch catching the sunlight as he gestured to Sovereign. The horses at my family's estate. They're nothing like this, are they? No, sir, Crawford replied. These mounts undergo years of specialized training. They learn to remain calm under gunfire, maintain formation in chaos, and respond to commands that could mean life or death in tactical situations. Sovereign here has logged more training hours than most civilian horses see in a lifetime. The morning had mellowed now, the harsh shadows softening as the sun climbed higher. Around them, the regular rhythm of palace life resumed. Tourists taking photos, children pointing in wonder, history continuing its steady march forward. We'll need you to come with us, sir, one of the palace guards reminded Miller gently. There are procedures that must be followed when someone interferes with a horse guard. Miller straightened his dishevelled clothes, dignity finally returning to his bearing. Of course, I understand now. He turned to Crawford one last time. Thank you for stopping me before I did something truly foolish, and for teaching me what this uniform really means. As Miller was led away, Crawford resumed his ceremonial position, Sovereign standing proud beneath him. The veteran touched his cavalry pin one last time before departing, sharing a knowing look with the guard, the unspoken understanding between those who had served. The crowd began to disperse, but there was a new respect in how they carried themselves, a deeper appreciation for the mounted figure standing guard. Parents could be heard explaining to their children not just about the impressive uniforms or magnificent horses, but about the real service and sacrifice they represented. What makes a tradition truly worthy of respect? Is it the centuries of history that define it, or the dedication and discipline of those who uphold it today? The events at Horse Guards Parade remind us that beneath every tradition lies a deeper purpose, one rooted in service, sacrifice, and pride. As we saw, the Horse Guards represent far more than ceremonial grandeur. They embody military excellence, with both soldiers and mounts prepared for real-world challenges while honouring a legacy that spans generations. This wasn't just a lesson in respect. It was a vivid reminder of the balance between history and active service. We want to hear from you. Have you ever misjudged something as just for show, only to later discover its deeper significance? What are your thoughts on balancing ceremony with active duty? Do you believe traditions like this still hold value today? And if you had been in the crowd during this confrontation, what would you have done or said? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love reading your perspectives and stories. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to show your support. Like this video to let us know you want more content like this. Subscribe to our channel for new stories every day. Tomorrow's tale will be another powerful reminder of the discipline and bravery of the Royal Guards. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this video with friends and family who would appreciate a story like this. Your support helps us continue creating content. And be sure to check out more of our videos on the Royal Guards to learn about the incredible traditions and values they uphold. You'll find the links to our playlist in the description. Thank you for watching, engaging, and being part of this amazing community. We can't wait to see your comments and hear your thoughts. See you in the next video.